What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Seneca. In the next few minutes, you'll understand why some of the wisest men in history never wasted a breath on revenge. You walk along the Via Appia. The sun is low shadows stretching across cobbled stones. Merchants pack up their stalls. A nobleman shouts at a slave. A politician slanders a rival behind closed doors. You watch quietly. This is Rome, vibrant, proud, and unfair. Seneca lived in this very world, among plots and poisons, betrayal and envy. He was born into privilege, rose to power, and eventually was forced to take his own life by the order of Nero, the very emperor he once advised. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And to understand how he endured that, without bitterness, we must begin with one simple but brutal truth: the world will not always treat you fairly. You remember being treated unfairly, falsely accused, overlooked, disrespected. The sting of it, the heat that rises in your chest when you know you've done no wrong yet still bear the weight of someone else's cruelty or carelessness. Seneca didn't avoid those moments. He lived inside them. But instead of collapsing, he refined himself. He wrote, "It is not that we are given a short life, but that we waste much of it." And what is one of the greatest wastes? Anger, revenge, obsession with fairness. Because while you're arguing with reality, life is quietly moving on. Scholars have debated whether Seneca's teachings match his life. Was he too political, too complicit? But his writings, written during exile and under threat, still ring with clarity. Unfairness is certain. Your response is optional. He didn't write to make you passive. He wrote to make you prepared. So tonight you sit with that idea. That injustice may visit you again. That someone will cheat, betray, insult, or overlook you. But you are not powerless. You are responsible for how you meet it. Not with vengeance, not with collapse, but with something better. You walk through the back alleys of Rome, where shadows linger longer and voices carry low threats. Even here, among thieves and beggars, one lesson echoes louder than the others: unfairness is inevitable. Seneca didn't sugarcoat life. He didn't pretend the world would treat you justly if you were kind, or that virtue would always be rewarded. In fact, he said the opposite: you must expect injustice from the wicked and envy from the good. You let that settle. It's not an excuse. It's a kind of armor. Because once you accept that life will not always be fair, you stop being surprised when it isn't. You remember the feeling a coworker gets credit for your work. A sibling twists the story in their favor. A stranger posts something cruel. You feel betrayed, not just by them, but by reality. But Seneca would ask, why are you shocked? He compares this to walking in the rain and being surprised when your cloak gets wet. Expecting the world to be fair because you are fair is like expecting a lion not to bite because you don't bite. It's a beautiful hope, but it is not strategy. And Stoicism is about strategy. Scholars often debate if Stoics accept that unfairness will come. Doesn't that make them passive? Doesn't that drain the will to act? But Seneca didn't preach surrender. He preached resilience. He wasn't saying don't care, he was saying be prepared. There's a story during his exile on Corsica. Seneca was mocked, abandoned by former allies, and written off by the Senate. He could have collapsed in bitterness. But instead he wrote essays on forgiveness, on anger, on the shortness of life. Why? Because he knew misfortune doesn't exempt you from your duty to live well. You think about today. Were you caught off guard by someone's selfishness? Did someone break your trust and you felt surprised by it? Seneca would nod and say, "That's on you. not in blame, in awareness. Because the world will sometimes cheat, people will sometimes lie, power will sometimes abuse. But your preparation is what determines your suffering. So tonight, instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you ask a better question: what did I expect and why? And slowly you begin to build a mind that's not cynical, but not naive either. A mind that says, unfairness may come, but it will not find me unready. A senator insults you behind closed doors. A colleague undermines you in a meeting. A neighbor spreads a false story. You feel the sting not just of unfairness, but of being seen wrongly by others. And the first thing you want to do is react. But Seneca taught something else: indifference is power. He wrote, "We are harmed not by insult itself, but by our opinion that it is insulting." In other words, if someone wrongs you, their action is one thing. But your suffering, that's something you often create. You pause with that. You've experienced it, a message left unanswered, a friend excluding you. You replay the moment over and over, adding meaning, intention, insult. But what if you didn't? What if you treated it like bad weather, unpleasant, yes, but not personal? This is what Seneca meant when he encouraged indifference, not cold-heartedness, but sovereignty over your attention. A refusal to hand your emotional peace over to someone else's pettiness. He lived this in one of the most cutthroat environments imaginable, Nero's court. There, your friend today could be your accuser tomorrow. Loyalty was currency, and betrayal was routine. But Seneca refused to collapse into suspicion or outrage. He chose a higher path, dignity through detachment. Scholars ask, was Seneca always consistent? Maybe not. But the consistency wasn't the point. The aspiration was to train the mind until it no longer twitches at every offense, until slights pass through you like wind through reeds. You try that now. Think of something small that bothered you recently. A look, a tone, a dismissive comment. What if you saw it as weather? What if you said, "This means nothing unless I choose to believe otherwise"? That's the practice. You're not ignoring behavior. You're simply refusing to absorb every drop of poison offered to you. And that refusal, that discipline, is how you protect your energy, your time, your soul. So the next time someone speaks unfairly, acts unjustly, or judges you falsely, you don't have to explain yourself or retaliate. You just walk past it, undefeated. You sit with the insult. It echoes in your chest, longer than in your ears. Someone dismissed you, mocked you, spread something untrue. They didn't strike you physically, but the wound feels real. And now Seneca leans in with a question: did they truly harm you, or did you permit it? This is the Stoic challenge that unsettles you at first. It shifts blame from the aggressor to your interpretation. Seneca believed that no one can injure your soul without your cooperation. You can be hit, lied to, betrayed. But whether you suffer, that's your choice. He wrote, "No one can bring you peace or pain without your permission." It's not about denying pain. It's about refusing to let someone else own your reaction. You reflect on a moment when someone wronged you. They lied, cheated, embarrassed you. You had every reason to be angry. But what made the pain grow wasn't just their action. It was the loop in your mind. The replay, the reliving, the conversation you kept having in silence. That loop was your choice. Seneca once described an enemy's offense like a stone thrown into a still pond. The ripple is real, but if the pond doesn't resist, the water eventually settles. But if the pond churns back in rage, the ripples multiply. Scholars discuss whether this idea, choosing not to suffer, minimizes real harm. But the Stoics weren't saying harm isn't real. They were saying, don't make it worse with your own hand. There's a story that during Nero's cruelty, Seneca was blamed for conspiracies he never joined. Rather than defend or retaliate, he stepped back from public life. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He let history decide and stayed true to himself. You ask yourself who has wronged me lately, and more importantly, am I still letting it live in my mind long after it ended? You breathe. Because once you realize no one can poison your peace without your consent, you take back power. You stop being a victim of stories. You become the editor of your experience. So the next time someone wrongs, you don't ask, how could they do that? Ask instead, will I let this shape me? Because unfair people may control the first move, but they do not control your response. You try to hold your head high, but inside you're rattled. The betrayal feels personal, the insult deliberate, the lie calculated. Your mind races, why would they do this? What kind of person acts this way? And Seneca answers gently, firmly, they act from ignorance, fear, or weakness. That's the Stoic reframe. It doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it changes how you carry it. Seneca believed that people are not born evil. Most unfairness, he said, isn't rooted in malice. It's rooted in confusion, survival instincts, or poor training of the soul. He wrote, "We should pardon all offenses of others, for the offenders know not what they do." You think of someone who hurt you, not just mildly, but deeply. It would be easier to believe they were cruel at their core. But what if they were just afraid? What if they were raised in harshness, shaped by scarcity, ruled by ego? What if they didn't even know they were hurting you? This is difficult. Your pride resists. It wants villains. It wants blame. But Seneca challenges you, look deeper, judge less. You recall that even during Nero's reign, Seneca often attributed the emperor's brutality to madness and insecurity, not pure evil. He saw weakness behind the cruelty, and in seeing that he was able to stay calm, compassionate even. Scholars often debate this view. Some argue it's too forgiving, but forgiveness wasn't Seneca's goal, understanding was. Because understanding breeds restraint. He knew that responding to unfairness with outrage usually leads to escalation, but responding with curiosity that leads to inner freedom. You try this now. Think of someone who's wronged you recently or long ago. Imagine them small. Not to belittle them, but to see them untrained, insecure, reacting instead of thinking. Does that soften the edge even just a little? You don't need to excuse them. But if you can understand why, then maybe, just maybe, you don't have to carry the same weight anymore. So when unfair people enter your life again, and you'll remember Seneca's advice, judge the act, not the soul. The wound, not the whole person. Because sometimes people harm, not out of hate, but out of hurt. The anger rises fast. Your jaw tightens. Your thoughts sharpen into blame. You want to say something, cutting final. You want to make them feel what you felt. But Seneca would stop you here gently but firmly with this truth: anger is a trap. He wrote, "No man becomes angry with someone he believes to have done nothing wrong." Anger arises from the belief that we have been wronged. But the wise man understands the fallibility of all. You pause and reflect. Anger feels powerful, but it's unstable. It promises justice, but often delivers regret. And more dangerously, it starts by targeting someone else and ends by consuming you. Seneca saw this firsthand in the court of Nero. One minute the emperor would praise a man. The next he'd sentence him to death over a rumor, a whisper, a slight. Seneca watched anger transform rulers into tyrants and citizens into mobs. He knew, once you let anger decide your response, you've given it your identity. And worse, anger at unfairness can become righteousness. It can wear a noble face. They hurt me, so I must respond. But Seneca warns, that's when you're most likely to lose yourself. Scholars still explore whether Seneca was too hard on anger. Is there no good anger, no productive fury? But he wasn't denying that fire exists. He was saying, don't burn your house down to kill a fly. You think of a moment when you let anger lead. It felt good for a moment. But what came next? Distance. Damage. Words you wish you could take back. And somewhere deep inside you felt small, not strong. That's what Stoicism tries to prevent. So you train yourself now. The next time someone acts unfairly and your blood begins to heat, you'll hear a quiet voice inside say, this feeling is not your guide. It is your warning. Because anger doesn't prove they were wrong. It proves you need a pause. And when you wait just a little longer than you're comfortable with, you often see the situation more clearly. So tonight, breathe deeper. Remember, the unfair person may have stirred the fire, but you're the one holding the torch. You feel it building, this craving for balance. They hurt you. They lied. They twisted something sacred. Now you imagine what justice would look like if only they felt the same sting I did. But Seneca stops you with a piercing insight. Revenge is a form of slavery. He wrote, he who seeks revenge is keeping his own wounds open, because when your peace depends on them suffering, you are no longer free. You carry them with you everywhere, in your thoughts, in your tension, in the silence that turns sharp when you're alone. Your energy isn't yours anymore. It belongs to the one who wronged you. And Seneca, who lived under one of the most treacherous emperors in history, knew this all too well. He could have used his influence to retaliate against enemies, but in his writings, he chose a different path: dignity over domination. Because the moment you base your peace on someone else's punishment, you've chained yourself to them. You think about the people who've harmed you deeply. Your desire isn't just to move on, it's to see them hurt, to make it fair. But Stoicism asks, what if that need is costing you more than it's worth? Scholars still debate, does rejecting revenge mean tolerating injustice? No. It means shifting your metric of justice from punishment to restraint, from getting even to getting clear. You don't pretend the offense never happened. You simply stop letting it define the direction of your life. There's a story after being ordered to take his own life by Nero. Seneca didn't curse the emperor. He calmly composed himself, spoke to his friends with peace, and accepted what was coming. Not because he was defeated, because he was already free. You reflect now, what revenge are you quietly holding on to? Whose downfall are you still fantasizing about? And is it healing you or holding you? Seneca's answer is gentle but firm. Let them go. You don't need them to suffer. You need yourself to recover. So next time the craving rises, when the sting returns, and the fantasy of revenge tempts you, remember, freedom means you walk away first. Not to lose, but to win something far greater. You stare at the injustice, the lie, the betrayal. It's tempting to descend to their level, to retaliate or play the same game they do. But Seneca whispers a higher challenge: do not let others drag you beneath yourself. He wrote, the greatest revenge is not to be like your enemy. And here lies the Stoic distinction, not in avoiding unfairness, but in maintaining your nobility through it. Think of someone who wronged you. The natural response is, I'll show them. I'll make them regret it. But Seneca points to a different kind of strength. Let them act from smallness. You act from clarity. He walked this path himself. Surrounded by political manipulators, rumors, and shifting loyalties, Seneca chose to keep his principles intact. Not perfectly, but persistently. Even when offered power through betrayal, he declined if it required selling out his soul. Scholars ask, how did he do it? How did he live among so much darkness without becoming part of it? Because he had a rule: my character is mine. No one else writes it for me. This is hard. Because when someone slanders you, steals from you, or disrespects you, the pressure to react like them is immense. But every reaction rooted in vengeance erodes who you are. You pause here. What would it look like to respond to unfairness with integrity, not weakness, not surrender, but calm, deliberate strength? You don't yell, you don't plot. You simply don't become them. You choose a tone that's firm but not cruel, a boundary that's clear but not bitter, a dignity that says, I know who I am. You don't get to decide that. This is what Seneca called living according to reason. Not being swayed by moods, insults, or injustice, but standing steady like a pillar in the wind. So tonight, ask yourself, is my reaction consistent with my principles, or just a mirror of their behavior? You are not here to echo the noise around you. You are here to set the tone. And that tone begins with restraint. You've realized someone has become a drain on your peace. Their words, their games, the subtle manipulations, it's no longer about a single moment of unfairness. It's a pattern. And now comes one of Seneca's hardest teachings, leave without bitterness. He wrote, "The wise man avoids the wicked, not with hatred, but with care." You don't have to burn bridges. You don't have to curse their name. You simply step away calmly, cleanly, with full ownership of your space. But leaving without anger, that's the real test. Your instinct may scream to make a scene, to expose them, to let the world know what they did. But Seneca believed dignity lay in your ability to exit without echo, to walk out without dragging shadows behind you. He once advised Lucilius, his young friend, to live among men as if the gods see all. That doesn't mean be passive. It means act with such self-respect that you don't need applause for your choices. Scholars note that in his final years, Seneca withdrew more and more from public life, not in retreat, but in quiet resistance. He saw Nero's world for what it was, toxic, unstable. And instead of trying to fix it, he focused on what he could govern: his character, his conduct, his peace. You reflect now, is there someone you need to withdraw from? A relationship, a workplace, a dynamic that repeats injustice? You don't have to hate them, but you don't have to stay either. Seneca would remind you, your soul is your responsibility. Protect it without cruelty. You don't slam the door. You just stop opening it. No long explanations, no bitterness, just distance, because leaving in anger keeps you tied. But leaving in clarity, that's freedom. So next time someone mistreats you repeatedly and you feel the need to prove, to punish, to correct, pause. Then choose the quieter path, the one where you don't get the last word. You get the last piece. The injustice lingers, not because it still hurts, but because you're still carrying the story. What they said, what they did, how it unfolded. You replay it like a scene from a play, imagining better responses, sharper comebacks, perfect timing. And now Seneca steps in with a quieter challenge: drop the narrative. He wrote, "It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And the most powerful opinion, the one you keep retelling yourself." You remember this. A time when someone treated you unfairly, and weeks, months, even years later, you're still telling the story. Not just to others, but in your own mind. You sharpen the villain. You refine your victimhood. You polish the emotion. But the longer you hold on to it, the more it becomes part of your identity. Seneca would ask, are you remembering or rehearsing your pain? This is where Stoicism invites you to let go, not just of the person, but of the narrative you've built around them. There's a subtle ego in storytelling, a secret reward. Because if the story proves they were wrong and you were right, then your suffering had purpose. But Seneca challenges that asking, is that worth carrying? He experienced this tension too. After being exiled by Emperor Claudius, Seneca could have told his tale of betrayal endlessly. Instead, he turned inward. He wrote about time brevity and detachment. He stopped narrating the injustice and started sculpting his inner life. Scholars still wrestle with this. If we forget the past, do we lose the lessons? But Stoicism isn't about forgetting. It's about not reliving. You can learn without lingering. You can remember without replaying. You pause now. What's the story you keep telling about the boss who wronged you? The partner who left? The friend who betrayed? What would it feel like to stop narrating it, not to erase it, but to stop needing it? Because the moment you no longer rely on your story for meaning, you step into something more powerful, a self no longer defined by hurt. So you practice silence, not just with your lips, but with your thoughts. And in that quiet, you become someone new. You sit quietly now, but inside the desire still flickers. They should know what they did. They should be held accountable. You want to confront, to explain, to make them see. But Seneca would offer another direction. Let your example speak louder than your anger. He wrote, "It is more civilized to cure wrongs than to avenge them. And one way to cure wrongs, to live so honorably that you become undeniable. Not through shouts, but through conduct." Think of someone who wronged you. Perhaps they never apologized. Perhaps they never will. You keep waiting for their moment of recognition, their moment of regret. But what if that's not your role? What if your healing doesn't require their understanding? Seneca often stressed this point. He believed your highest response to injustice isn't explanation, it's elevation. Becoming so clear, so calm, so steady in your own path that their behavior fades into irrelevance. There's a moment from his life that illustrates this. During his forced retirement, he withdrew from public office. Many mocked him, said he had lost favor, but he did not answer them. He focused instead on writing, leaving behind works that would outlast his critics by centuries. That's the Stoic paradox. You don't win by winning the argument. You win by living better. Scholars continue to reflect on this. Is silence always the right move? Doesn't some injustice demand a voice? Yes, but Seneca would say, pick your battles and choose your battlefield. Sometimes the most powerful correction is not confrontation, it's transformation. You consider this now. What if the way forward isn't in making them understand, but in making yourself undeniable? What if clarity is your closure? You don't retaliate. You don't plead. You rise, you work, you grow. You carry yourself with so much poise the story rewrites itself without a word. So next time the temptation comes to prove your side, to force remorse, ask instead, what would it look like to simply live too well to be ignored? And then, begin. Sometimes the pain doesn't come from strangers, it comes from those closest to you. Family, friends, mentors. The people you believed would never treat you unfairly. And when they do, the wound cuts deeper. You don't just feel betrayed, you feel foolish. And Seneca once again offers steady ground. Expect imperfection even in those you love. He wrote, "You must live for all mankind, but let each step be carefully watched. A friend may turn, a companion may fail, but your character must remain." This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become realistic, not cynical, but prepared. You think of someone you trusted, someone who let you down. Perhaps it came without warning. Perhaps you still don't know why. You keep asking, how could they do that? But Seneca reframes the question, why did I believe they couldn't? He believed much of our suffering comes not from what people do, but from our assumptions about what they shouldn't do. When you expect perfection, kindness, or consistency from all, you set yourself up for unnecessary disappointment. Seneca himself knew betrayal intimately. He had students who abandoned him, colleagues who spread rumors, and leaders who turned on him. Yet he kept writing with calm. Not because he was untouched, but because he expected humans to be human. Scholars often explore whether this Stoic caution dulled intimacy. Did it make close relationships less meaningful? But Seneca argued the opposite. Real love sees the flaws. It embraces people, not ideals. You reflect now. Have you been hurt because you placed someone on a pedestal? Did your pain come from their act or from your refusal to believe they were capable of it? You are not asked to stop loving. You're asked to stop clinging to illusions. So the next time someone close lets you down, don't crumble. Don't rush to exile or accuse. Pause. See their humanity. Acknowledge your hurt. Adjust your expectations. And carry forward not guarded, but grounded. Because wisdom isn't detachment. It's clarity. And with clarity, you can keep loving without losing yourself. You've handled the hurt. You've resisted revenge. You've even begun to release the narrative. But part of you still aches not for justice, but for recognition. You wonder, will they ever see what they did? Will they ever change? Seneca offers a humbling reminder. Change may never come, and that's not your burden. He wrote, "The foolish are often bound to their own faults, but the wise man seeks freedom from needing their reform. This is the quiet test. Can you find peace even if the person who wronged you never understands? Even if they live their whole life unaware, unchanged, unrepentant?" Stoicism says yes, because your peace isn't purchased by their awakening. It's rooted in your own clarity. Seneca's life gave him ample proof of this. He tried, often unsuccessfully, to steer Nero toward wisdom. He offered counsel, wrote letters, cautioned against cruelty. But the emperor continued on a dark path. And eventually, Seneca stepped back, not in surrender, but in acceptance. He could not control the mind of another. He could only control the conduct of himself. Scholars still debate, when do we give up on helping others grow? When does patience become foolishness? The Stoic reply is when your peace begins to erode under the weight of someone else's stagnation. You ask yourself now, who are you waiting for to get it? Who still owes you an apology you may never receive? What if that never comes? Would you stay stuck, or would you choose to rise anyway? You're not asked to stop caring, but you are asked to stop waiting. Your growth is not contingent on theirs. So you let them be. You send them love from a distance if needed. And you reclaim your time, your thoughts, your forward motion. Because if your healing depends on their change, you've built your peace on sand. But if you release the outcome, you become unshakable. So much has happened, and still the hardest part remains, not letting it change who you are. The unfairness was real. The wound was deep. But now the real question is this: will you become bitter or wiser? Seneca wrote, "Misfortune is virtue's opportunity." To the Stoic, every injustice is a forge, and every choice you make afterward shapes what kind of person steps out. This is where your character either hardens into resentment or expands into wisdom. It's tempting to close off, to build walls, to trust no one, to say, "I'll never let that happen again," and start living from suspicion rather than strength. But Seneca offers a different path. He doesn't ask you to pretend nothing happened. He asks you to grow not away from the pain, but through it. He saw betrayal. He saw corruption. And yet he continued to write about virtue, about humanity, about resilience. Because he knew it is easy to be kind when life is kind. But true character appears when tested. Scholars often point to Seneca's essays on hardship as some of his most moving work, not because they're philosophical, but because they're deeply personal. He turned his wounds into wisdom, his losses into letters, his pain into peace. You reflect now. What will you do with your experience? Will you carry it like a weapon or like a torch? You could choose to live colder, to become guarded, but you sense that would mean they've won, that their unfairness didn't just touch you, it changed you. Seneca's answer is quiet but fierce. Don't let them decide the shape of your soul, so you breathe. You forgive not to release them, but to free yourself. You open your heart not because they deserve it, but because you do. You carry forward with softness and strength, because the truest revenge is to still believe in virtue. Now you find yourself standing at the edge of something new. The injustice is still a memory, but no longer a prison. And Seneca's final reminder arrives not with thunder, but with stillness. You are stronger for having endured. He wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." It's strange, isn't it? The very thing you thought would break you has in quiet ways built you. You've seen what it means to stay calm when others rage. You've learned to walk away, not out of defeat, but dignity. You've discovered how to let go, not because you forget, but because you value your peace more than your pride. Seneca's world was full of turmoil, exile, betrayal, injustice at the highest levels. But what he left behind wasn't a story of bitterness. It was a blueprint for resilience. He proved that you don't need fair circumstances to live a noble life, that you don't need the apology to find closure, that you don't need revenge to feel powerful. Scholars still reflect on this paradox. How did a man so wronged write with such calm? The answer lies in everything you've just walked through. You become what you practice, and now you practice something new. You don't rush to judge. You don't cling to stories. You don't demand closure from others. You build it within. And as the days pass, you'll find yourself lighter, more anchored, unshaken by slights, unbothered by noise. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And if ever you forget, if the hurt returns or the urge to retaliate rises, remember Seneca's whispered challenge. Would you rather be right or be free? You choose freedom. You choose peace. You choose to carry yourself through life with the strength of someone who has been tested and come through kinder, wiser, freer. And now you exhale. The weight of old stories begins to dissolve. The tightness in your chest softens. The restless thoughts that once replayed every unfair word begin to fade into a quieter rhythm. You sit still as if in a dim Roman study. The oil lamp flickers. Scrolls rest on the table. You imagine Seneca there, quill in hand, speaking not to the world, but to you. Softly, calmly, unshaken. He's not trying to fix the world. He's helping you navigate it with wisdom, not war, with silence, not shouting, with steady courage that does not need applause. You've walked a hard path tonight. Look how far you've come. You resisted the pull of vengeance. You sat with discomfort instead of reacting. You paused where others would have lashed out. And that is not weakness. It's discipline. It's strength. Let yourself be proud, not loud. Let your thoughts soften, not because the world is fair, but because your soul is now clear. And tomorrow, if unfairness returns, as it always does, you'll smile inwardly. You'll know that your center is stronger than the chaos, that your peace cannot be stolen, and that your dignity will always be yours to protect. Sleep well tonight, philosopher. You have nothing to prove, only everything to live.